All right, everybody. Welcome to the solo edition of our trade deadline stash episode. I'm Dan Bespris. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Basketball? It's like how my Nana Helen used to talk. She was from Crown Heights in Brooklyn in the early 1900s, and she called me Daniel in basketball. And today, apparently, I'm channeling my Nana Helen. Welcome to the show, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're going to be doing my stashes list, which is basically, I got to think of the right way to preface this. Stashing players for the trade deadline, by and large, is dumb. But we're 2 weeks away now, so there really isn't that much of a cost involved as long as you're stashing guys that are already doing something. Where you run into trouble, and this is more so on the head-to-head side, is collecting players who are getting zeros. You shouldn't do that. You're just going to set yourself too far behind the eight ball for a payoff that probably won't be there. Roto, it's a little bit of a different story. Games cap, I guess I should say, not necessarily Roto, but games cap leagues where you can take a guy and you can just plop him on your bench for whatever. You just treat them like they're injured effectively, which doesn't really hurt you in those formats. And so that's a little bit of a different beast. You can reach a little bit farther in terms of who you're putting on your roster for after the deadline. Follow me on Twitter at Dan Bespris, DanBesbris. I am Old Man Squad on the new Blue Sky Network and Old Man Squad Fantasy over on Instagram. Like the trade deadline show, that's coming up on February the 6th, Thursday morning. We're up to 594 likes now. I want to get to 750. We're not going to get to 1,000. I lost too much time. Let's get to 750. Please make sure to like that show. The link is in the show description. It's also at our YouTube homepage. And Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. They've got touchdowns, three-pointers, and hat tricks, so Bet Online has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. And the nice part is there's so much selection. Football, basketball, college level, hockey, UFC, whether you're a novice, intermediate, seasoned bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. They also have the opportunity, by the way, and you may remember we used to talk about this more, the ability to watch the games as they happen. Check them out today. They've been an amazing partner for us here on Old Man Squad. BetOnline. The game starts here. Okay. It took me a while in between like falling asleep in front of my computer screen repeatedly, not because the content was boring, but because I really haven't slept in like a week. Thanks, influenza. To come up with the right way to present the data that we just told you we were going to be presenting, which is the Dan Bespris Stash Board. I also wanted to make sure that this show set the table for future shows because over the next 2 weeks leading up to the trade deadline, we're going to be having all of our friends back on the program, or as many of them that have time and actually matches up with my own cockamamie schedule to give their preferred stash names, either for the deadline or for silly season. And this is what I came up with. This is a slide that just says exactly what I just said to you. So YouTubers, you can just read it. Everybody else, we're going to go ahead. We're going to start at the top with the stash type of guys that already hit. Amen Thompson and Scoot Henderson. Scoot, certainly more of the stash type. Amen Thompson was someone that we all basically drafted because we knew coming into the year that all it was going to take for him to hit value was any little tiny thing. And we got a bigger than little tiny thing. We got Jabari Smith Jr. out for like 1 to 2 months. And so anything on top of that is just additional gravy. So that one, Amen Thompson, is off the board. He's off limits. The other one that's off the board now is Scoot Henderson, who was on the board as recently as like a week ago. What day was that Scoot burst onto the scene when he got the spot start and just has not looked back? I've already lost track of the days. That was January 14th. So it was 9 days ago as of the time of us recording this podcast when he popped off for 39 points, and suddenly the stash was over. Scoot is a thing now. Holding him through the trade deadline, that's dumb. Like, it's not dumb. Like, it's a no-brainer. It's dumb to even put him on the list because he's crushing it right now. His stats over the last 2 weeks, basically since he got moved into a more prominent role, is top 60 level production. And I would argue better than that as you continue to go more and more recently. The turnovers are always going to be bad with Scoot. The field goal percent is definitely not going to sit at 50% long term. But overall, he's not a name that we can use on this list. So he's off limits as well. So that brings us to the first true slide for today's show. And these are my favorites. I've put these out on Twitter before. I've mentioned them kind of not all together, but in passing as we've worked through other podcast recap shows, things like that. My 4 favorite names are Deni Avdija, Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, and Ayo Dosunmu. Let's take a minute or two to talk about each one of these guys. Deni Avdija being the first one on the list. And I think what you guys are going to yell at me is, Dan, how can Deni count as a stash if he's already averaging 29 minutes a game? This one's pretty simple. Deni's a stash because it's only since Jeremy Grant went down that he became closer to a startable everyday fantasy guy. He was basically top 140 the entire year until 3 weeks ago. But it hasn't been like the Scoot Henderson thing where he got an opportunity and, Scoot's averaging like 20 and 10 and going absolutely crazy. Avdija has been fun over the Grant absence where he was been in like the 18 and 8 range with a couple of assists, but his turnovers have been very high. Free throw percent has been kind of low. He's been sort of hovering near the edge of the top 100 during that stretch. And if you look at kind of like individual weeks in there, he had a week where he was top 90, and then he had a week where he was top 60, and then he had a week where he was top like 140. The problem, of course, is that Avdija has likely already been added in almost all places. So he's the one that's kind of closest to being off limits. The only reason I'm leaving him in this bucket, well, not the only reason. A big reason is I still think his role could get bigger because we saw Grant out for a while, but Simons could get moved. DeAndre Ayton could get moved if they open up center minutes and they run small and Avdija gets to log a few minutes at center. That's always good for players' fantasy value. So that's one reason that I think you could still call him a trade deadline stash type, active stash. The other reason is we've been talking about him as an active stash for a month. Pretty much since the moment that Jeremy Grant went down back in, I think that was in December, right? That was for the second time Jeremy Grant went down, was in December. That was you pick up Deni Avdija, you see how this goes, and then you just hold him through the deadline. So whatever he did while Grant was out, that's fine. That's when he was rolling top 90. That, to me, is just this little preview of the Avdija you might get post-deadline if Grant is gone and anybody else gets out of the way. So that's Deni. Next name on the list is Bilal Coulibaly, and you guys are going to be like, and by the way, you're going to be right to say this one. Dan, what are you doing to me right now? Coulibaly, we've been sitting on him for a while, and he's been quite bad of late. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, number one, that's what makes him an active stash. He's been bad, but he's not been a zero. He's been shooting 37% from the field. That's terrible, but at least he's getting you like 11, 4, and 4 with a steal and a block. Okay? It's not, especially for head-to-head leaguers, he's not a negative. He's a positive in everything except, I would argue, field goal percent. Free throws haven't been that great, but he's not taking that many. So really the field goal percent is the one where you're like, yeah, okay, that's bad. But the other stuff, he's accruing stats for your head-to-head team. Roto, you've had to just sit on him to this point. The reason I like Coulibaly as a stash is quite simple. 2 words that begin with the letter K. Kyle Kuzma. Coulibaly sees his usage, I don't want to say perfectly tied to Kyle Kuzma being in or out, but there was a stretch in middle of December that Coulibaly was taking 13, 18, 20, 13, 14, 16, 17 shots a game. And now all of a sudden, Kuzma's back. So is Jordan Poole. They're playing full minutes. And Coulibaly, since he came back from a small injury basically about 2.5 weeks ago, his shot attempts are at 10, 8, 9, 12, 10, 9, 8, 9, 15 against the Lakers because they don't bother to stop anybody. But and you can bet your butt that in this ball game that may have already happened by the time you guys see this show, he probably won't get more than 12 shots against the Clippers in their next ball game. Because the Clippers play good defense. The Wizards seem like they're going to have their high volume guys in. And that leaves Coulibaly playing a ton of minutes. And the rebounds don't suffer. They're fine. He's still getting his 5 rebounds a game. And his 3.5 assists are pretty much unchecked. Although I would argue that if you take Kuz out of the mix and the ball's in his hands more, that 3.5 assists probably gets up to 4. And the steals and the blocks, those are fine because the minutes are there. But the thing that we're looking at with Coulibaly is this difference between 10, 11 shots a game and 13 or 14 shots a game. It's a big deal, even for somebody who has very, very clear fantasy stat issues, meaning the low field goal percent, the free throw, that's not great. If you take his 10.5 shots a game where he's at 12 points and a three-pointer, and you ratchet that up by 25%, that's a big deal. You add another 3+ points to his ledger, and then he's a 15 to 16 point guy instead of 12. 16, 5, and 4 is a pretty damn good line, even if the percentages aren't that great. So that's why Coulibaly is on the list. Alex Sarr's been on the list since basically the very first show we did this year. He's still number 142 overall. He's still shooting 40% from the field. He's still grabbing 7 rebounds and blocking 1.5 to 2 shots a night. But those percentages have just shrunk. And for Sarr, the pathway to additional stuff is Jonas Valanciunas. I mean, they'll play somebody else in that backup center role, but it'll be Sarr's job. After the trade deadline, or certainly once you get into silly season, that's going to be the time that they're just like, do whatever, bud. We don't care. Take more shots. Get your shots up from 11 a game to 12 or 13. Get your minutes up from 27 to 29. That's what's going to push him, hopefully, inside the top 100. And my fourth favorite is Ayo Dosunmu on this list. And Ayo, and again, this is another player that we've talked about a lot over the year, but these shows are an opportunity to kind of consolidate all the names. Dosunmu on the season is number 114. He's averaging 30.5 minutes a ball game, although admittedly not as many minutes per game since he's come back from his injury. And that's fine. I don't want to say they're babying him, but they're trying to be careful. Someone, thankfully, is. Soft tissue things that just ruin everybody. And like Chicago in their last ball game, Ayo didn't even play in it. What did he have? I think he was sick for that one, something like that. The one before that, did he play in the one before that? Yeah, he had 32 minutes in the game before that. Oh no, he's not sick. It's the soleus muscle. Is that back down in the calf again? All right, well, we'll see how that all translates. So Ayo might be out for a little bit, in which case, if he has to miss any time, then you could probably bump him down a rung. But my thought process on Dosunmu, and I think you guys will generally agree, is that the minutes are fine. It's all about the ball touching his hands. He played 32 minutes off the bench in a loss at Portland over the weekend, and he got 8 shots up in 32 minutes. Compare that to Zach LaVine, who played 38 minutes and took 21 shots, or Nikola Vucevic, who played 35 minutes and took 14 shots. We need Ayo playing 32 minutes and taking 10, 11, 12 shots a game, not 8. It's not a big ask, but it's market. It's notable. It's a 20 to 30% jump in what he's doing at the offensive side, which is going to translate to more points, more threes, more assists. The nice thing about Dosunmu is we know from the late part of last year, when he gets minutes and usage, his fantasy game translates quite well. I think the last 2 months last year, He was number 65. That was on 13 shots a game. Not an insane number to get to if you take Kobe White or Zach LaVine out of the way in Chicago. That drops a lot of shots back into the bucket. And a guy like Dosunmu is going to be willing to step into them in a way that he's just sort of not right now. So he's definitely one of my favorites. This calf strain or whatever he's dealing with right now. It's not. I guess it's not the calf specifically. We'll see what that means. If he has to miss time, then pause on Dosunmu. But if he's okay, he's a guy that, and as are all four of these dudes, I'm quite comfortable squatting on these guys for the next 2 weeks. You can't use all 4 roster slots on them. I hope that was clear in my opener from today's show. You're not going to stash all 4 of these guys. Although, again, Avdija is giving you probably enough to just play him right now. Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, Ayo Dosunmu, you can't just sit on all 3. So if you're like, Dan, what's the order of operations here? Well, Avdija would be number 1 because it feels like he has maybe the easiest path to more. We know Portland is going to pull the plug on a bunch of these dudes. I'd probably go Sarr number 2, Dosunmu number 3, and Coulibaly number 4. Just because he's so streaky. The next page is our close calls, and we'll go through the rest of the names on today's show a little bit quicker. I wanted to just make sure we spent some time on the early ones. And before we get to the close calls, I want to remind you guys about our running partnership now with our buddies at UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up today using promo code OLDMAN, OLDMAN, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash on your 50% deposit match and a free pick, a free square. Freebie, baby. That part is great. If you guys watched our, what would that be? That would be the Wednesday recap show. I walked you through in real time an Underdog fantasy lineup that I put together for the Thursday evening basketball. And of course, it's tied into football because the freebie right now is a Patrick Mahomes gets 1 yard. Then that one cashes. But then I put that in with, I think, a Franz Wagner under on points, rebounds, and assists. We wanted to go lower on that total because I don't know what he's going to be like in his first game back after missing a month and a half. And then I forget who the other name was we put on the card. But you guys can do the same. I would encourage you to check it out. Sign up today. If you're nervous about depositing money, I understand that. Take some time if you need to. But just hit the link and sign up. Make an account at the very least. Use the link in the show description. That's the fastest way. Or again, sign up on your own today using code OLDMAN. To make sure, one of those 2 ways, make sure you use those so you unlock the 50% deposit match and unlock the free play that will be part of your very first card that you put together. And it's a way to basically get like an extra, X3 on whatever your buy-in might be. UnderdogFantasy.com, a proud partner here of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball, and we are so happy to have them aboard. Check them out today. Play along on the app. Play along on PC. You know me. I'm old. I rock on the PC. And let's win together. You know what? I downloaded a video for Underdog, and I forgot to show it. We'll do it on the next one. Close calls list. Robert Williams, who has an asterisk next to his name, because if DeAndre Ayton gets ruled out, then Robert Williams might get bumped up a little bit, because obviously he'd be starting a basketball game, and then that makes him a guy you could play like in the moment and not have to worry about holding for a couple of weeks. But we don't have enough information on DeAndre Ayton at the time of recording this podcast. Still, Ayton is on the block. And more importantly, Robert Williams is on the block. If Robert Williams gets traded to a place that gives him a consistent 20 minutes, Lakers, I'm looking at you, he becomes a nightly fantasy play. He's top 100 in 20 minutes or better. Toumani Camara is on the list in case Portland guts the place and leaves, Camara and Avdija and whoever else, whatever, Scoot, young guys to go mop up the rest of the season. Noah Clowney is a close call. His minutes have been trending up. I continue to not be a full believer in his fantasy game. He has these big ones every once in a while, but for the most part, he's been pretty quiet. And like, he's not inside the top 200 over almost any stretch of games. I'm not really there with him. And then Jonas Valanciunas is the last one. He's just like, he's so boring. He's been basically top 115 to top 135 almost every week the entire season in almost exactly 20 minutes a game for the Wizards. My issue with JV is I don't know that there are any places where he would go and get more than the 20 minutes he's getting right now. He might go someplace else where the games mean more, but that might mean that he gets yanked around even more. If you're thinking the Lakers would just give him 23 minutes, I don't think that's the case. He'd be in there to bang with big dudes, but most of the time when teams go small and run real fast, Lakers would put Anthony Davis at the 5. They don't want to be a lumbering oaf team unless they have to be, which they do against some teams. You want JV back on the Pelicans? I don't think that's not happening. I don't see a destination that's going to give him 23 or 24 minutes, which is kind of what you need with Valanciunas. And it hasn't been there yet. So that's why he's only a close call and nothing more. And here's the riff-raff. These are a bunch of names that you guys have thrown at me over the last couple of weeks, names that I've scoured over while, looking at box scores. These are guys that just to like keep in the back of your head. I'm going to rattle them off Ace Ventura style, and we can kind of come back to them later. And I'll pick out a few that I think are more interesting from this batch. Here's the whole batch. Ready? Donovan Clingan, Grady Dick, Bub Carrington, Stephon Castle, Zachary Reese-Shea, Yves Missy, Jalen Smith, Jordan Hawkins, Yusuf Nurkic, Sarr Thompson, Cam Whitmore, Isaiah Collier, Gershon Yabusele, Jalen Williams, Luke Kennard, Gigi Jackson, and Trey Mann. And I always like to end those. I don't know if you guys remember the Ace Ventura scene. And one hell of a model American. And then the lady, or the Ray Finkel's dad says, and who the hell are you? And he says, I'm just a very big fan, sir. Laces out. Of the names on the riff-raff, Donovan Clingan is interesting because, like we talked about, Time Lord gets moved, and DeAndre Ayton is going to get shut down at some point. Clingan almost definitely will have a run this season where he just has, like, unfettered center minutes. I think it's going to be more silly season, so that one's probably more March than February. But when it happens, Donovan Clingan is probably going to be one of your silly season champions of the universe. He's going to be that 9-point, 13 rebound, 2.5 block pickup where you're like, yes, my team was punting these categories before, but not anymore. Grady Dick, nah. We're going to need a bunch of shutdowns in Toronto. Bub Carrington is an interesting one. If Jordan Poole gets shut down, he wasn't last year, remember. Poole got to play it out pretty much, but Brogdon is effectively deceased. And then again, you move anybody else out of the way. I don't know that his fantasy game is quite there yet. Spurs are competitive, so I don't think Stephon Castle is going to do it this year. Same with Zachary Reese-Shea, basically the exact same reasons in Atlanta. Yves Missy is your guy if you think the Pels pull the plug soon, which is a possibility. Jalen Smith is a very interesting one. He's like, get your mouse, your itchy fantasy trigger finger ready if Vooch gets moved. You got to on Jalen Smith like that. Jordan Hawkins, same story as Yves Missy. If the Pels pull the plug, he would get to do a bunch of stuff. Yusuf Nurkic, if the Suns trade him to a place where he gets starters minutes, maybe he gets more touches than playing behind two superstars and one other star adjacent level player. Sarr Thompson in Detroit, the fact that they're competitive to me says this one's probably not going to change his role all that much. Cam Whitmore, that would be one if the Rockets consolidate. So, like, if they send out Tari Eason and Dylan Brooks or Tari Eason and someone else or whatever, and they pare down the size of their rotation, that would be the way to maybe get Whitmore a little more playing time. But to me, that one's a little bit more of a long shot. Isaiah Collier, put him in the Donovan Clingan silly season book for when Utah, again, shuts everybody down. Gershon Yabusele, same thing. If Drummond and Embiid are just done for the year at some point. Jalen Williams was somebody that was mentioned to me. I disagree with that one. Luke Kennard in Memphis, that's going to require some injuries or a possible trade. Gigi Jackson got mentioned to me. I'm not into that one. Trey Mann is an interesting one because Brandon Miller got ruled out for the entire season, And earlier this year when Miller was out, Trey Mann actually put up some pretty decent numbers. Although, mind you, I think LaMelo Ball was out for a few of those games, but not all of them. The other thing to think about with the riff-raff or whatever else is like, what happens in a Jimmy Butler trade? Who would maybe go back to Miami? Is Bradley Beal potentially a stash candidate right now? Because if the Suns get rid of him the way they expect to, you got to think he goes to a place where he's better than the clear third option. Like, even the maybe like a second option shared with someone else, even that would be a nice step up. Let's say it's Miami. Let's say the Suns and the Heat do finally get a trade going. What happens to Bradley Beal when he shows up in Miami? He probably gets the full starter's job. And he'll be the second highest usage guy behind Tyler Hero, most likely. And then Bam and Nikola Jovic and all that stuff. And they've got a lot of fringe guys that'll probably just take a hit. But I don't know. Maybe he ends up someplace else. So is Bradley Beal a stash candidate? Someone also mentioned Nikola Jovic, but he's already a guy I think that needs to be getting played. So, and also, frankly, if someone comes in, Jimmy Butler's not playing right now. If someone shows up in Miami, that's just bad for the other guys, including Nikola Jovic. But I'm not, like, he belongs on rosters right now as long as you can keep him there. And that's kind of the list. Thinking about other teams that, may go into hard tank mode. And there's just a lot of clubs right now that are competing for those last play-in spots where it means more to them than you think it ought to. We got to remember that, like, a play-in spot is more meaningful for some franchises than others. All right. So that's the Dan Besbris stash list. That's what we're starting with. Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk to guests, all of my favorite buddies that have available free time. That actually matches up with my own terrible schedule. We'll get them on here. They're each going to bring 2 or 3 of their own favorites, and we're going to just create a master list. I'm going to try to make that available to all of you guys. Again, I say that, and then sometimes it takes me longer than I intended to. But either way, it's going to be a really fun exercise in how do we predict the trade deadline. It's a really fun time of year. Don't use too many roster spots on this unless you're actually getting good production out of these guys. Anyway, like the show, like our deadline show, subscribe. You got to subscribe. It's mandatory at this point. You can't be watching all this stuff and listening and not subscribing. And if you have a chance, again, iTunes, Spotify listeners, to drop that 5-star review. Also, so I have a tweet out right now. That's basically, I need favors from you guys again. We're at one of those junctures. I'm going to throw it up on the screen, and I'm going to put the link. I'm going to forget. I'm going to forget to put the link in the show description. But here's the tweet that I've got going right now. This is the one that I need you guys to go find on Twitter, and please like it. Go find it. Please like it. I need you guys to help me out with 1 or 2 small favors. They're really important, especially fast right now. So please go hunt that bad boy down. I was going to say I was going to like put it in a chat room, but such a thing doth not exist. Please do find that particular post. Hit the like button. Need your help with that as well. Okay, for real this time, I'm out. I'm Dan for Old Man Squad. I'll talk to you guys soon. I don't even know what time it is.